Greetings all. This is Robin Osborne coming to you from Michigan State University, and I'd like to welcome you to our EAB University's 2018 Fall Webinar Series, which is funded by the USDA Forest Service. Along with my EAB University colleagues, Cliff Sadoff and Elizabeth Barnes from Purdue University and Amy Stone from The Ohio State University, we are glad you could join us today for our webinar by the specialists at Duke University entitled Managing Ash Trees Post-Emerald Ash Borer. Our presenters today are Matt Lux, who's the Director of Midwest Transmission Vegetation Management at Duke University. Prior to this role, Matt had served Duke University as a Manager of Transmission Vegetation, Field Supervisor for both Transmission and Distribution Lineman, and Area Planner for Work Management. Matt is a graduate of Indiana Wesleyan University in Business. One more presenter is Megan Martin, Lead Project Manager for Environmental Consultants Incorporated, a contractor for Duke Energy. Prior to Duke Energy, Megan worked for an environmental nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and graduated with a degree in environmental management from Indiana University. And our other presenter, too, is Alex Christie, a GIS forester for Environmental Consultants Incorporated, a contractor for Duke Energy. Previously, Alex worked for the city of Novi, a suburb of Detroit, as a field verification technician and graduated with a degree in environmental studies and a certificate in geospatial analysis and mapping from the University of Michigan, Dearborn. Before we get started today, please know that we welcome your comments and questions. Type them in the chat feature, which you can find by mousing over the bottom or occasionally the top of your screen. Duke Energy members will be responding to the questions and comments during and after the webinar. To keep these free webinars coming, we need your feedback. After the webinar, you will be emailed a link to a short, voluntary, confidential survey that we hope you'll take the time to fill out. If you're one of the first 10 people to fill out the survey, we'll be sending you an EAB goodie bag. For those of you wanting CEUs today, I will be sending you information on how to obtain these in the aforementioned email. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing soon at www.emeraldashborer.info. You will also find the recordings for all previous EAB University webinars there. Thank you for attending today, and could the members of Duke Energy please share your screen, and we can begin the presentation.
Thank you, Robin. We're pulling up the presentation now. And with that, we're going to go ahead to our first speaker, Matt Lux.
All right. Well, Robin, thank you. And I thank everyone for joining us today and the opportunity to share this EAB program that Duke Energy is putting a lot of effort into and a lot of focus in. So once again, my name's Matt Lux with Duke Energy. I'm Midwest Transmission Director of the Vegetation Program. This presentation is to share with you of how Duke Energy Midwest is going to be responding to this ever-growing EAB problem that we have encountered. First, we will provide an overview of the Midwest Transmission and the Transmission Vegetation Program, and then we'll jump into the EAB and the Duke Energy EAB program. And as mentioned earlier, we will filtering or answering any questions that would come in pertaining to the presentation that we do today. All right, so what is a transmission line? So at a high level, I'm sure that many of you, as you travel across the Midwest and across the country, you will see these latticed steel towers that are out in the fields, and those towers are transmitting high voltage power lines. For example, the 69 kV, 30 or 138 kV, 230 kV, and also the 345 and 765 kV. kV meaning kilovolts. So the purpose of these are to transmit high voltage lines to our substations, and then they are basically The voltages are brought down to a level to where you can use them from an industrial and also for your residential. So roughly 7,500 miles in the Duke Energy Midwest territory, and that territory consists of Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. The next slide, here's an overview of the footprint that Duke Energy has that impacts the 3 states of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. We have, to divide that 7,500 miles up, we look at about 5,500 of those miles are non-NERC lines that are 200 kV or below, and then our NERC lines are approximately 2,000 miles of NERC lines that are anything above 200 kV. So what is transmission vegetation management? Duke Energy takes a very methodical approach to how we manage the vegetation on our footprint here in the Midwest. So we maintain trees, other vegetation along the lines that deliver the electricity to our customers. We take a lot of great pride in hiring qualified, trained personnel to inspect and also to clear the vegetation that poses threat to our power lines. Reliability and safety are the utmost importance of what we want to deliver to our customers. So the integrated vegetation management, IVM practices that are based on the voltage and the type of line, as well as the type of vegetation and its proximity to the line. So what I want to speak to for the IVM program that we put in place here, we don't just target one specific type of application when we go to do this. For example, of mowing just the right-of-ways. We need to look at different approaches because we want to have communities of good vegetation that's in our rights-of-way. And how we do that, we target that on a seasonal basis. And those could be from a herbicide program that we have. We promote the pollinators within our rights-of-way, and we look at not invasive or incompatible species that would affect the reliability of our transmission line. So we have multiple programs that fall underneath that IVM program. So what is transmission vegetation management? Background here. It's quite a broad perspective here of when we look at what is called capital projects, and this can consist of new construction. For example, when you see clearing of rights-of-way and clearing of land that we're introducing new voltage lines that go there to transmit for the ever high demand of electricity these days. So you have new constructions. Also, we have a grid system here in the Midwest that has somewhat outlived its longevity. So we have what are called rebuild programs, and replacements are part of our capital program as well. So our vegetation program is very instrumental to the success of these of the new construction and also of the rebuilds, pole replacement projects. As these new transmission lines are built, substation expansions and new substations are also part of the vegetation program to where we come in. And all of this is, within our best work practices across all the footprint of the Midwest as well. So when we get into the maintenance projects, we look at a routine maintenance of a 6 to 10 year cycle, and those cycles are based off the voltage and the widths of the right-of-ways. So it all is based upon that type of viewpoint of what we look at. So also from a storm response center, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the most recent 2 hurricanes that have impacted our partners in the Carolinas and also in Florida. So an effective vegetation management program can be demonstrated through those storm responses with least impact to our assets if we do a good maintenance program of our vegetation. As I spoke to earlier, we discussed about the herbicide program. This program is an effective program once we are able to sustain and acquire a good right-of-way. The herbicide program, as I mentioned before, will target those invasives or those incompatible species that would jeopardize the safety and the reliability of our system. We have what are called reactive programs. Those are situations to where that we have, when we do a compliance, NERC compliance program, that if we have seen vegetation that may affect the reliability, affect the safety, those reactive programs are tied to that, such as the ground control program. When findings are found out there, that we can go address those immediately.
So thank you, Matt, for that background for what we do here at Duke Energy as a part of the Transmission Vegetation Management Group in the Midwest. Let's dig a little bit into the emerald ash borer now and what our emerald ash borer program is here at Duke Energy. So as most of you may know, the emerald ash borer is a small metallic green beetle, about the size of a grain of rice. As you can see on the far right side, that's a really close-up picture of what this little beetle looks like. It was discovered in southeastern Michigan, expected to come into the Midwest through shipping materials. And the larvae of this emerald ash borer beetle feeds on the inner bark of ash trees. So as you can also see on the right-hand side, that's what the damage is that this emerald ash borer is doing to these ash trees. And this disruption prevents nutrient flow throughout the tree, effectively killing them rapidly, which is typically between 2 to 5 years. So here at Duke Energy, as Matt touched on, we have a reactive program in place that's targeting these danger trees to the power lines. And in 2016, we decided to conduct an independent survey of the 69 kV and 138 kV power lines. What the goal was of this survey was to see how many ash trees are out there that are dead, dying, and living that are within striking distance of our power line. In this independent study, turned out to be about 22,000 of these ash trees that are within striking distance of Duke Energy assets and power lines. So what this means as a company is that there's approximately 5,200 line contacts and outages that could take place if these trees were not managed. Another thing that we found in 2016 was that the emerald ash borer was not present in select counties, but as of 2018, according to Duke's footprint, EAB is present in all counties that we provide electricity for. So here at Duke Energy, the conclusion was taken that we need a systematic approach to cutting these ash tree threats along our system in order to promote reliability to our grid and safety as well. And as you can see at the bottom, that's our emerald ash borer program logo. So what is Duke Energy's Midwest EAB program? So this is a 5-year program. It started here in 2018 in January. This year has been mainly a planning year. We're going to go into the different technologies that we're using right now, as well as how we've been planning this work to begin in 2019. This work's going to take place through 2022. We're focusing on the 69 kilovolt and 138 kilovolt lines, and we're identifying ash trees along these corridors through remote sensing technology. So that is light detection and ranging, which is also referred to as LiDAR, and hyperspectral imagery, HSI. We're going to have Alex go into those specifically and what they mean for our program here in just a few minutes. So when we're looking at the Midwest footprint, we wanted to prioritize the areas that we are going to work based on where we have identified the most damage to ash trees so far. So our plan currently is to address all the living, diseased, and dead trees that could impact Duke Energy assets by 2022. And we're going to start here in Southeast Indiana and Ohio, Kentucky regions, and then move into the Southwestern Indiana and Northern Indiana region. This is just based on current infestation rates and research that we conducted with non-Duke Energy affiliates. As you can see on the map on the right, those sections are mapped out for you as well if you're curious where you fit within our classification. So we'll move on to Alex. Could you tell us a bit about the remote sensing technologies we're using?
Yeah, thank you, Megan. So for our EAB program, we flew 2 flights using fixed-wing aircraft to collect LiDAR and hyperspectral respectively. The LiDAR information that's collected allows us to identify the height, striking distance, and the proximity of vegetation to the line. From that LiDAR point cloud, we can determine the vegetation segments and estimate tree canopies, which allows us to assign a threat for the striking distance and proximity to the line to those segments. The hyperspectral, on the other hand, is what helps us to identify tree species as well as the relative health of those species. When we combine these layers together, it allows us to really identify the ash and dead trees that are nearby our assets and are a potential threat to our assets. In 2017, we flew a remote sensing pilot in the Midwest that just sampled a few lines just to see the vegetation-related capabilities of the technology. After a successful program there, we moved on to a bigger project this year in 2018 to collect approximately 2,800 miles of 69 kilovolt and 138 kilovolt circuits. In this, we used 2 different flights with fixed wing, as I said before, to collect LiDAR and hyperspectral imagery, respectively. The data that's come back from those 2 flights is currently being field validated by a set of young field validators who are double checking the accuracy of all this information. In the future, next year and beyond, we're going to continue surveying with LiDAR and hyperspectral, the 69 kilovolt and 138 kilovolt, to complete the rest of our footprint here in the Midwest. That's going to total out to be about 5,500 miles.
Thanks, Alex. So as you can imagine, with 22,000 trees estimated to hit our assets here at Duke Energy, and with all this data that we're going to be receiving from flying around 5,500 miles, we have the goal here at Duke Energy to create a work plan targeting high-risk ash trees based on spatial identification. So that spatial identification being the LiDAR and HSI data. So our solution is to do some work planning. So we're going to input this LiDAR and HSI data and prioritize it, which means prioritizing the dead, dying, and living ash trees based on the below variables. So that would be reducing our customer impact. We want to make sure that we're going to one person's property once, getting the ash trees that are a threat, and moving on so that they don't have people knocking on their door multiple times over multiple years. We also want to reduce our environmental impact through avoiding stream crossings when possible, and also avoiding those maternity roost trees for the Indiana bat. Another priority is to target the highest threats to reliability. So getting those ash trees that are on the verge of crumbling that could really impact our assets here at Duke Energy. And then we also are going to optimize reliability and sustainable efficiency. We will create work packages based on these priorities, and we're going to plan and execute these work packages based on their spatial information. So how can we work through these in a way where we're going to get the most trees down in the least amount of time and be the most efficient? So that all sounds great, but what does our execution look like for the Emerald Ash Borer program? Based on some preliminary efforts, we're targeting about 4,500 ash tree removals per year. So this number over 4 years is going to greatly reduce the ash tree impact to our assets. We also will execute this program in a way that minimally impacts external and internal stakeholders. Those external stakeholders being communities, property owners, and internal stakeholders being various members of Duke Energy. So this is going to be through coordinated vegetation management. So within Matt's organization, he went through all those programs where trees are being removed. So working together as a team to target these ash trees in a way and work together to get them down in the most efficient way possible. And we're also going to be engaging the communities and internal stakeholders constantly. We have quite an intensive communication plan just so that everybody knows where we are, what we're doing, and they understand what our Emerald Ash Borer program here in the Midwest is. We're also going to be reducing impact to power quality and long-term outages through the removal of these trees. And just as Matt said before, safe operation remains a core value of Duke Energy through this program. So,
Well, thank you, Megan. So what are some of the known challenges that we're going to be faced with? Hopefully we have given you a good insight of those challenges as we move forward. So these trees are devastated and they're crumbling as we speak, and especially with the impacts of storms that come through. So how do we target those trees that are going to impact the reliability and the safety of our grid? So they're unpredictable. There's many of our teams that have been out in the forest and out in the woods that they will just hear trees that just fall, that have crumbled, that are they have expanded their life and they're falling without any wind, without any storm or anything such as that. So they're very fragile. So when you say fragile and cannot be climbed, in our industry, a lot of our work is done manual work, where we have folks that are climbing trees to perform this type of maintenance in our IBM program. There has been quite a bit of rules set around the safety expectation of this, is that, many of our resources and our vendors out there are not allowed to climb these types of trees. So you can imagine the challenges that we're going to be faced with of how to remove this type of tree. Misleading health, or the tree health. You may have trees that have cavities that have been disintegrated by the EAB, and understanding the health of the trees and looking at the risk of what that's going to be, and the magnitude of work that will go into removing what you feel is a healthy tree, and then it could be something that is very dangerous for us to do. So those challenges are in front of us, and the weather. That is a big factor here in the Midwest. As we know, through our 4 seasons, it changes quite quickly. And, getting through or getting to these targeted trees that have been identified through our program, it's going to be very challenging as we're fronted with, with severe weathers, and also as the snow season comes in, and getting through that type of challenges to effectively remove this. So when we look at industry resource availability, I'd like to speak a little bit more onto this. As you see, we take a lot of great pride in what we do and who we hire to work for Duke Energy, and we go through an extensive framework to make sure that this company is safe before they come on to perform any type of work. The magnitude of work that is going across not only the Midwest but the United States, there's a very high demand for this type of talent for vegetation work, and it's an ever-changing, ever-challenging for us to continue to find good qualified people to work for us on this. So we're all going to the same resource per se, and trying to pull away from that. And at this time, it's been very challenging. I know that California is faced with a lot of spend that's out there due to the forest fires and the active programs that they've got going on. And the same is carrying through on the East Coast as well. So we're trying to pull locally from the pool of workers here, and we found that has been somewhat challenging, but we're working through those, and our expectations are that we will find the right folks and the right talent to perform this work over the next 4 to 5 years. But those are some of high-level known challenges that we will be facing as we move forward to effectively complete this program.
So here with the Emerald Ash Borer program, we know that we're not the only ones who are noticing the effect of the emerald ash borer on the ash trees in the Midwest. So it was decided as a group that what if we could pull together some other utilities of similar size to Duke Energy, city foresters, environmental consultants, and just talk about how they're facing this emerald ash borer threat. So on April 10th, 2018, which was earlier this year, we all came together for about a half-day session. It was structured, and the way that we worked it is that we discussed how each group has managed emerald ash borer. And we went into the industry practices, the safety that Matt touched on. How are you getting these trees down in a way where people are operating safely? We talked about industry and vendor challenges that people have had, as well as just tree health and EAB facts. Get everybody on the same page about what we know about ash trees and what we're finding out there. One of the other topics that we touched on as well was budgeting and finance. This was a first annual gathering. We deemed that it was a success. And just so that we can all stay on the same page and work together to have creative solutions to manage the emerald ash borer, it was decided that this will potentially be an annual thing. So that's what we have on our emerald ash borer program. We really thank you for listening in. And as Robin mentioned, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat tool and click reply all. We'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Megan, and everyone else for this information. And please feel free, folks, as Megan said, to give us any questions. If you have questions that you think of after the webinar, I will supply a email address that you can send questions to Duke Energy that can be answered as well. So we have some time here to chat about some things, so please feel free to put your questions in the box. Okay, Nathan has one here. Are there any cost-sharing programs to plant pollinator plots under Duke Energy rights-of-way?
Great question. I appreciate that. That is actually a program that we're looking at in our Carolinas East program. That's under consideration. I know that there has been some activity with that, but to answer your question, yes, there are, but it's at a level now to where it's still under review and how that will basically impact certain targeted areas for that type of program. But great question. Thanks.
Let's see. Wow. Are you finding any lingering healthy ash trees that do not need to be removed? Are you working with researchers to study these trees?
Thank you. So there are healthy ash trees out there. Alex has been leading a field validation effort and getting a good idea of what is out there. But our main criteria here is to see what is going to potentially impact our assets. So if those trees aren't being treated by the customer, then we're doing a tree-by-tree basis to see if it has to be removed. We are not working with researchers at this time to study these trees, but if that
we have reached out to Cliff Sadoff, the entomologist at Purdue University, and he has advised us with literature and information that has helped us stand this program up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Must I wait till spring to treat using residential type pesticides?
We aren't sure about that. Vegetation management focuses on the removal of vegetation, and we are not pesticide experts.
I would suggest on the emeraldashborer.info website, David, there is some information there, a lot of resources that you can find there to help answer that question for you. There's especially on the homepage, look for document insecticide options. Okay, let's see. Do you respond to consumer complaints that are EAB related?
Great question. And we do not take consumer complaints as far as the ash tree goes. Now, if there is a tree that's in our right of way and it's a threat to our system, we'll meet with the customer, talk about options that the customer would have, and send them to the right resources if they're wanting to keep that tree. If the tree is a threat to our system and it's in our easement, then we have to take the tree down, and we'll talk to the customer about it.
All right, thank you. What do you plan to do with the wood from trees that you are removing? Is there any chance of salvaging them?
So at this time, with the wood that we're removing, depending on the area that this takes place, we'll either break it down into manageable pieces to aid in rapid decomposition, or we can leave it to certain property owners to use as firewood. An important note there is that it is illegal to take that wood out of state, so that would be something that we would make clear with the landowner. In regards to salvaging them or other uses, we haven't pursued that at this time.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. And the tree belongs to the customer. So the wood, if the customer would want it to be salvaged for a purpose, the customer can, pursue options there.
All right, thank you. If a tree is not in your right-of-way but threatening your assets, do you remove the whole tree or just the portion that is threatening the asset?
And I would like to speak to this. John, thank you for the question. Pertaining to this program, the EAB program, we target those are called danger trees that are outside of our right-of-way. We personally work with each property owner and walk through the process of how we do to remove that entire tree. So versus just topping the tree, we're leaving a liability in a sense that's out there that we feel is in our best interest, that we work with the property owners to remove the entire tree, is how we manage that are outside the right of way. Good question, thank you.
All right. Where it's appropriate and not a hazard, do you ever consider leaving part of a dead tree as a snag for wildlife benefit?
Once again, if we are, for this program, we target the tree that could be impacting our reliability and the safety of our grid system. We work with the property owners, but our approach is that we will remove that tree completely. So there is any unknown risk that may be out there that we're not mitigating once we do that. So our approach is that we will leave those. There is no problem if many property owners would just say fell the tree, leave it there. We'll use that for wildlife habitat, the whole thing. So that's where we work one-on-one with the property owners, and we want to make sure that we all have a consistent message when we walk out of that meeting. So.
All right. Any more questions while we're here? All right. When a tree is removed, will this allow EAB to just move on to another ash tree?
I would love to answer that, but we're not really emerald ash borer experts. I would suggest potentially reading out to a professor of entomology at Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State. Robin, maybe you'd have a good contact for that question.
I do. The person that you first, I think, Cliff is actually answering this. It says it does not really matter if you remove or leave the tree, is what he's telling me. So there are numerous resources, David, on the emerald-borer.info website about that, what researchers are finding out and what they are also working on as far as different tests and that kind of thing. So I hope that's helpful. I know there's a lot of information. Oh, and Cliff also says there are way too many EAB in the woods for this to make a difference. So that's from our expert from Purdue. Thank you, Cliff. Appreciate it. See, you mentioned reducing environmental impact as a goal. How are you planning to do that other than avoiding crossing streams?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a very close relationship with our environmental department here at Duke Energy. And ever since October 2017, I've been having sporadic sit-downs with them to brainstorm that exact question. And one thing that we've come up with is that we're working through government entities to get a, we'll say, KMZ location of any endangered species roost trees, a big and a big habitat concern for the Indiana brown bat is that they flock to these dying trees with shag bark or bark ripping off. So if we have those locations and we can target those removals outside of their mating season and protect that species. So that's another kind of impact that we're trying to promote.
That's a lot of work. There's a lot of, like you say, you know, everything impacts something else, and so it's quite quite intricate and complicated sometimes with these kind of things. Let's see. Are there any other invasive pests that are on your radar in terms of being a threat to the grid?
At this point, we have not identified any other invasive pests that has been targeted by Duke Energy that we feel would be a threat to our grid system. Not to say that would not change in the upcoming months or years, but at this point, I am unaware of anything.
There's nothing as invasive as the EAB.
Correct.
I've heard some of the foresters talk about the Asian longhorn beetle, but I don't know that it has impacted the tree industry or the trees environment as EAB, as the ash borer has.
Yes, I think you're right, Karen. Do you have contact info for following up on remote sensing of ash with LiDAR and the hyperspectral technology?
Yeah, we'd be happy to work through Robin to get you a contact. Alex Christie would be our point of contact for us here at Duke, and he was the one who spoke to the earlier slides.
Yes, and I will be providing you with an email, Jessica, so that you can contact Duke Energy with your question, and they can do that for you. Let's see. Megan Abraham says Asian longhorn beetle is found in Cincinnati, and the USDA, and it comes in to remove trees that are infested. So far, 100,000 trees have been removed in the ALB quarantined area in Ohio. And I know so far they have not found ALB in Michigan, and we're keeping our fingers crossed. So that's, yeah, ALB. ALB is bigger and more, it's a little easier to see. And none, oh yes, none in Indiana so far either. So we're hoping that it won't be quite as sneaky and do as much damage before it's found like emerald ash borer has been. So. Let's see if we have anything else here. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions at this point. Well, we'd like to thank our presenters from Duke Energy today. You've really given us some, it's been good to see this information, and it's one more piece of information that we can put in our little arsenal against figuring out what the heck's going on with EAB and how people are managing this, especially after it's gone through. Rights of way, that is a big area, a lot more than say urban forestry. So everyone has been wanting to know things about the type of information that you're giving us. So we really appreciate it. Again, folks, please make sure to fill out the survey when it's sent to you, and I will also be giving you some information on how to contact Duke Energy with further questions. And I appreciate everyone coming and attending our webinar today. And with that, I'm going to stop the webinar and let you all get on with your day. Thank you so much, everyone.